I'd like to raise a question about Espada's kind of arrogance, you might say, and that's not a criminal complaint, that's not a violation of law, but he seems to enjoy flouting the law. He seems to be saying, catch me if you can. And maybe that also has affected the investigators, who therefore become more determined to catch him if they can.
I think it's common. I don't want to paint everyone with a broad brush, but it's common amongst elected officials after you have lobbyists and people coming to your office constantly asking you for things, and you're public figures, you're in the media. It's in some cases human nature to get a little arrogant. I'll give you the case
power
of
corrupts, absolute power corrupts,
yeah,
absolutely.
Was it Lincoln said, you want to see how man acts, give him power. And we see this case of State Senator Joe Bruno. You're guilty. Until the end, he's saying, well, you know, you're not taking into account.
I wasn't really doing
anything wrong. Right. This is the way the game is played. We saw the case of State Senator Hiram Monserrat. Till the very end, he was running. He actually showed up to now State Senator Jose Peralta's office, pandering. And I think it's common amongst elected officials in some cases to become arrogant, maybe because of the power that, so.
Well, you may recall that on the issue of whether he lives in his district, excuse me, at one point he was inviting reporters to his apartment in the Bronx, despite the fact that he appears apparently at various crews following him and getting the shots of him going to this place in, I think it's Mamaroneck, is it? But the people who were invited in, the reporters, reported that it seemed like it was not actually lived in, the apartment that he claims to be his residence. Right. That would seem to be almost like Gary Hart, the failed presidential candidate, when there were the rumors circulating about his sexual escapades, and he said, no, they're not true. In fact, you should follow me around to show that it's not true. So they followed him around, and they found him on a boat with 4 or 5 women, scantily clad. The name of the boat happened to be Monkey Business. That was the end of his political career. But Jason, you look like you're eager to jump in.
Well, I think it is very common. I agree with you. And I firmly believe, like I said earlier, that there needs to be stronger state oversight into what these politicians are doing before things escalate to the level they are. You know, I think if we have some sort of, we need to pass some sort of new law here in New York that gives more power to the state to investigate before there is a serious allegation.
Well, presumably that would also have to be a law that makes more possible the investigation of the state elected officials as well, because very often they're all from the same kind of clubhouse and so on.
It is a very slippery slope. Judges are appointed. DAs are elected officials. They have to run for office. That's right. So everyone's sort of intertwined. It's a very...
it's a kind of a closed society.
It's a closed society. Exactly. That's the right way to put it.
Yeah, the word is a club, but either way. But it's a kind of a private club, kind of an exclusive club.
So part of it is also in my opinion, it's sort of a, who knows how many other elected officials don't live in their districts.
Very good question.
Don't have the right residency. But again, when you're the most hated, in some people's opinion, man in the state, your dirty laundry will be more likely to be looked at than somebody who may be a likable individual.
When you bring that kind of attention to yourself, you put yourself under the microscope, and I certainly don't want to say that Senator Espada is the equivalent of John Gotti, but you had that personality in John Gotti who just flaunted that he was the Don, and put that out there and basically challenged the federal government to convict him, and eventually they did. And that's what happens when you're up front. So are there other politicians doing the same thing? I'd say structurally we have some flaws that indicate that's a good possibility.
Chances are.
You know, but they're under the radar, and they're under the radar for a reason. They're smart enough to be under the radar, and they haven't bought into the hype about being a politician.
You raised the question, Roberto, about you're saying the most hated politician. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but certainly he's not very popular in light of these kinds of allegations and his past. Do you think that might enter into his defense strategy whenever it comes to a possible criminal trial, or even if this civil lawsuit ever goes anywhere, that hey, I can't get a fair trial here. I can't get a fair trial. Is that, Edgar, do you see that?
Yeah, well, then the question for the court is, if you can't get a fair trial here, tell us where you can get a fair trial. Because of the publicity.
He's not going to say Wyoming County.
I mean, yeah, if you take this upstate to a county up in Albany or something like that, the jury up there has heard just as much about this as we have here in New York City. So that's one of the questions for the court. There's no other, we have to have it here because really where else can we go? Everybody's heard about it. The second thing is that I think Senator Espada would like to keep this matter as close to home as possible, where he may feel that he's going to have a little more sympathy because he's taking care of a certain amount of people who he can rely on perhaps to step forward on his behalf.